Jump scares are everywhere. Love them or loathe them, that combination of an abrupt image or startling sound cue can be used to thrilling effect across the horror genre. Like any other cinematic staple, they've been employed tastefully and tragically. Reproduced, remixed, and revitalized countless times throughout film history. Condensed to their simplest form, they're a gradual build in tension and its inevitable release. But what was the first jump scare? How did they evolve from their primitive beginnings into the reliable, genre-defining motif we know today? And which ones had us biting our nails the hardest and leaping from our seats the highest?
Anything that moved was exciting, thrilling.
Jump scares were evolved by horror,
Overwhelming.
but they weren't born there. In 1903, filmmaker Edwin S. Porter recognized the power of a single, skillfully wielded edit. His seminal silent western, The Great Train Robbery, incorporated what may be the very first use of an intentionally startling moment. An abrupt cut from the main action to a bandit firing his gun directly at the audience. Silently, of course. But whether or not the gun could be heard, the effect was still the same. That single iconoclastic image has endured through film history, recreated and reimagined by dozens of filmmakers. In the decades that followed The Great Train Robbery, silent horror films began experimenting with abrupt visual cues. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, The Phantom of the Opera, all intended to make audiences recoil. When these films screened, they were often accompanied by live orchestras that would accentuate these startling moments with sharp, percussive cues, a primitive version of the modern jump scare. But it wasn't until 1942 that a filmmaker would truly synchronize sound and image to make audiences jump. And like many horror movie innovations, it was born from limitation. Val Lewton, a Russian-American producer at RKO, was tasked with creating a series of low-budget horror films under strict conditions. Budgets were capped at $150,000, runtimes could not exceed 75 minutes, and the titles, more often than not, were dictated by the studio. With little money for elaborate effects, Lewton traded spectacle for suggestion, psychological terror over explicit horror. That philosophy defined Cat People in 1942, and led to the first modern jump scare, the legendary Lewton bus moment. The structure was defined then and there. Lewton builds tension as Alice walks alone, quickening her pace as the camera closes in until... silence. And then, the sudden hiss of a bus. It was Lewton's editor, Mark Robson, who inserted the sound cue by accident during post-production, just to test timing. But when preview audiences jumped, Lewton recognized its brilliance. A happy accident that birthed a horror staple. The Lewton bus technique quickly became a favourite of horror filmmakers in the decades to come. Lewton himself reused it across his RKO films. But horror still carried a reputation as a lesser genre. Cheap thrills confined to small budgets and B-movie status. That perception changed in 1960 when Alfred Hitchcock elevated horror to new heights.
People always mean well. They cluck their thick tongues and shake their heads and suggest oh so very delicately.
Hitchcock's Psycho was arguably the first prestige horror film, and his meticulous approach not only redefined the genre, but revitalized its popularity. The same could be said for his jump scares. The iconic shower scene borrowed Lewton's formula and fused it with Bernard Herrmann's shrieking score, synchronizing every stab of the knife with piercing string hits. It was the sound, more than the imagery, that assaulted the audience's senses. The editing was revolutionary as well. 78 shots in just 45 seconds, a montage of disorientation inspired by Soviet editing theory, that the collision of images creates meaning and emotion, not the images themselves. Hitchcock didn't just show murder, he made us feel it.
As you know, you could not take the camera and just show a nude woman being stabbed to death. It had to be done impressionistically. So it was done with little pieces of film. The head, the feet, the hand. I think in that scene there were 78 pieces of film in about 45 seconds.
It created a visceral rhythm that would redefine the pace of films across all genres going forward. Throughout the 60s, the jump scare would continue to evolve. Mario Bava's Black Sunday used lighting as a scare device. The Haunting weaponized off-screen sound. Wait Until Dark delivered one of the most famous jump scares in a non-horror film. And in 1961, The Innocents perfected the almost subliminal silent apparition. The moment would make a lasting impression on William Friedkin, who further pushed the form while editing his own horror film in 1973, a hotly anticipated adaptation of William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. Friedkin spliced the face of the demon Pazuzu for just a few frames into key moments of tension.
When you see just a frame or two of it, it's shocking, and it speaks volumes. It's not in the script. I decided to put it in later. I think all of us probably think in subliminal perception. First time I saw it was done by Alain Resnais in Last Year at Marienbad and in Hiroshima Mon Amour.
By operating just below conscious awareness, these subliminal scares triggered something primal in audiences and expanded what the technique could achieve.
No rats. Thanks a lot.
Just 2 years later, in 1975, came perhaps the most famous modern jump scare. Steven Spielberg was working on his own adaptation of a bestseller, and due to a famously troubled production, hadn't found time to deliver the one final scare that he felt the audience deserved. During post-production, he used the swimming pool of editor Verna Fields, poured milk into the water for murkiness, and captured a reveal that still catches viewers off guard to this day. Fields held the shot for a half-second longer than Spielberg intended, lulling viewers into a false sense of calm before ripping it away. The scare lands precisely when we least expect it. If Spielberg and Verna Fields perfected the pacing of the misdirect, then John Carpenter codified the template. When Halloween was released to the world in 1978, Carpenter trained audiences in a modern rhythm of horror. Tension, false alarm, silence, and then the real scare.
Haunted house ride. Things jump out at you and these foolish things happen. And I remember what scared me about those rides. I tried to duplicate them in a cinematic way. The things that go bump and jump out and scare you.
He used stillness in the camera movement, widescreen framing, and deep focus for sustained dread, turning Michael Myers' presence in the background into its own form of object permanence horror. Sometimes the scare comes not when the characters notice him, but when we do. Silence and score become weapons of equal power, the music often dipping completely before the release of tension. Like Lewton before him, Carpenter had discovered a new tempo for terror.
Cute, Bob, real cute.
The 70s and 80s continued to bring evolutions. Alien shocked audiences without the need for music in the iconic chestburster scene. Carrie introduced the final stinger scare. Friday the 13th pushed it to its extreme. An American Werewolf in London landed a series of false awakenings and played with our expectations.
Holy shit.
Though perhaps no filmmaker recognized the formula of the jump scare
Let me come in.
better than Stanley Kubrick. While shooting The Shining, Kubrick consciously avoided what he considered the cheap trick of startling audiences, instead focusing on developing a sustained musical dread. He toys with our anticipation through elongated, excruciating scenes, and when flashes of violence occur and shocking jump cuts and the discordant music cues finally hit,
Forever
they feel misplaced and unpredictable.
and ever
And all of it is by design.
and ever.
Clear.
Carpenter struck again with The Thing in 1982, blending patience and payoff. Psycho 2 combined the kinetic editing of its predecessor with Halloween-style tension. A Nightmare on Elm Street toyed with audiences the same way Freddy Krueger relished in The Hunt. Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2 weaponized kinetic camera movement and chaos. Then, in The Exorcist 3, a single, static shot held for nearly a minute before erupting into one of cinema's most effective jump scares. Pure, delayed terror. By 1996, horror fans had well and truly memorized the rhythm of the jump scare. It would take something subversive to shock audiences 5 decades removed from Lewton's bus. And that's exactly what Wes Craven intended to provide.
Hello?
With Scream.
Yes?
Just as the movie's protagonists are aware of the genre cliches, Craven acknowledges the audience's awareness. He teases false scares that never deliver, and then reverses them. He bluffs the audience not once, but twice in a row, then hits us with the scare. And as characters literally spell out the formula of horror, Craven gives us exactly what we were expecting, and still, it surprises us.
The sort of awareness of films and how they are structured and what the cliches are.
Please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface.
Is a way of putting the audience off balance because they say, oh, they're aware that there are cliches, therefore, I bet this isn't going to be cliched.
Not in my movie.
So how do you still shock audiences once the tropes have been not only established, but subverted?
You can just drop fucking dead.
While the formal elements of the jump scare were well known to horror fans by the turn of the century, that didn't stop filmmakers from reinventing it. The Sixth Sense expertly incorporated camera framing and delayed gratification. The Others, a modern reinterpretation of The Innocents, also revealed the terror in ordinary objects and drew tension from the unseen. Mulholland Drive broadcast the arrival of its biggest scare, and still it managed to terrify. Conducting itself in broad daylight and finding uncanniness in the mundane. The Ring increased immersion with an in-universe, analog reference for the character's fear, and perfected its own formula. Quiet, quiet.
I saw her face.
And then loud. Signs also tied its shock to the diegetic world of the story. The Descent used claustrophobia as a trap. Paranormal Activity transformed stillness and surveillance into unbearable tension, reinterpreting the static takes of films like The Exorcist 3 for the found footage era. But few directors wielded the bombastic jump scare as effectively as James Wan. In 2010's Insidious and its sequel, Wan developed a rhythm. Long silences, creeping misdirection,
I can still hear that voice.
And sound design pushed to extremes.
If you're gonna go to such great effort to set, the audience on edge and you're building it up, I want my payoff to be real.
His inclusion of subtle diegetic sound effects before each scare was a staple all of his own. Moments of tension are littered with small scares in the corners of the frame, using light and shadow as tools of deception, like Carpenter before him. Wan pushes the dynamic range of sound mixes to the absolute limit, punctuating near silence with auditory stabs so loud that you'd swear your sound system had exploded. He continued this legacy in The Conjuring in 2013. POV shots are used to ramp up suspense. Environmental elements are incorporated to terrifying effect. Like in Insidious, scares are often cued by character reactions rather than the event itself. In the television space, Mike Flanagan set his own benchmark for terror. 2018's The Haunting of Hill House features one of the most celebrated jump scares of the decade, arriving mid-conversation, without warning, during a moment of pure emotional tension. Fittingly, Flanagan's particular brand of horror would bridge with Kubrick's just 1 year later, merging legacy and innovation in his underrated adaptation of Stephen King's Dr. Sleep. In 2018, the concept of prestige horror would be recirculated with the release of a twisted new family drama. From a first-time feature director, Ari Aster's debut, Hereditary, married visceral psychological horror and confronting violence. His portrait of a haunted middle-class family tapped into terror on a gut level, receiving the kind of audience reception reserved for the likes of Psycho and The Exorcist half a century before.
The jump scares that are there, I couldn't avoid. I really couldn't find a way to not have them in there. So hopefully they feel like honestly earned, but the goal was always to make something that was simultaneously kind of quiet. I wanted to make a film that kind of stares the audience in the eye and gives them images that are meant to kind of burn themselves into your mind.
His jump scares are less about surprise than they are endurance. Long, unflinching moments where fear lingers rather than releases. Sharp musical stabs are often traded for droning passages of score that reflect the excruciating emotional fallout. Or, after the more heady moments, no score at all. Like the characters, we're forced to languish in the turmoil. The transition into the 2020s brought us an explosion of psychological subtlety and no shortage of bombastic entertainment. And while the jump scare had been redefined several times over, that didn't mean that filmmakers had run out of creative ways to implement it. It Follows employed its concept as a vessel for delivering its scares, not suddenly, but relentlessly. Jordan Peele's Get Out integrated jump scares into social and emotional tension. 2017's It and its sequel were full of over-the-top, spectacular jump scares, fitting of its crazed villain Pennywise.
You're supposed to say 3.
The Night House and The Invisible Man found clever new ways to reveal a scare, not from a visible threat, but from the anticipation of terror in negative space. And Barbarian and Smile weaponized our expectations again, using a delayed permanence to keep us trapped in the horror long after the reveal. What we've begun to experience in the last decade, at least in the best examples, is a shift away from jump scares as mere shock value and towards restrained psychological scares as an outward reflection of a character's emotional state. In Talk to Me, The First Omen, or Weapons, the jump scares are fewer but richer, woven into the film's strong visual design and the psyche of its characters. All of them blur the conscious and unconscious state, keeping the scares unpredictable and audiences suspended in near excruciating dread.
What the fuck?
A whole century after the Great Train Robbery, the basic formula remains the same: tension and release. Tension and release. Too many times for me to name them all. The rhythms have been readapted as our sense of film literacy continues to evolve, and yet in its simplest form, for better or for worse, the jump scare has always been there. Though it's been adopted by other genres from time to time, it's a tool that still feels ingrained in the fabric of horror. And if there's one thing I've learned from digging through this history of on-screen terror, it's that when all else fails, the jump scare remains.